to be addressed. I'm not too sure whether I wish Arsenal a loss, but let's just focus on the budget as well as trade, of course, happening around the country. In studio, I have the Member of Parliament for Emase North and the Chairperson of the Trade Committee, that is the Honourable James Gakuya. Karibu sana Mheshimiwa. And I also have Mary Emase, the Member of Parliament for Teso South and a member of the Budget Committee. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
First of all, to start us off, before we even talk about trade, I know Mheshimiwa is much passionate about trade, but we start with the supplementary budget tabled yesterday. The promise by the Kenya Kwanza administration and President Ruto was a 300 billion shillings budget cut. That doesn't reflect in this supplementary budget, Mheshimiwa. Are we going to have that cut anyway?
Thank you. The supplementary budget was approved yesterday. Today we actually passed the appropriations bill. I want to say the issue of 300 billion cut not having been realized is relative. It depends on who is speaking about it. But I want to tell you, there was a cut. You know, when we are budgeting, basically, we just working on forecasts. We are working on figures. The supplementary was basically about ratifying expenditure that had been incurred without approval of Parliament, which is provided for under Article 223, and then basically rearranging figures in terms of reducing here, add here. What I can tell you, there was planned expenditure, right, that had been appropriated for. But we also had expenditure that had not been planned for. It was not anticipated, but then that expenditure did arise. And it needed funding. Money needed to be found somewhere. If no savings had been made, we would be talking about a very big deficit right now that would have demanded or required for borrowing for us to be able to provide
it was
the
over
money
800
to accommodate.
billion.
Yes. I'll give you an example. We've given money for teachers, for recruitment of JECC teachers, that is 9 billion. We've given money to the Hustler Fund. Those were unanticipated expenditures. We've put money in security, you know, to address the security issues that are happening within the North Rift and the Dasal regions mainly. We put money into a number of expenditure that was not planned for. So assuming those expenditures did not arise, then we would be having the entire 300B saving on the table. But because we had to reallocate, you know, you bought bread for 10 shillings, right? Yet, I think that's not a good example. Let me just put it this way, that whatever amount we have saved by, you know, cutting on various votes, we have reallocated it to the emerging expenditures.
All right.
Yes.
Okay.
So to me, we made the savings.
You made the savings.
Yes.
Mheshimiwa, looking at the budget, the supplementary budget, of course, in your contribution again as Member of Parliament for Emase North, does this supplementary budget fit into the agenda of a hustler budget?
Yes. Allow me first and foremost to salute the viewers wherever they are watching us from, and especially those who comes from my constituency, which is just around here within the capital city. Coming to the supplementary budget, let me say, one, yes, I have seen a very good realignment of this supplementary budget by that budget committee, and especially at this particular stake of time when things are not normal. One is that you cannot be able to anticipate drought and the extension that it can take. Today, you can see that, in fact, it is not too much. About 6 billion has been already given out for that particular purpose. Those are the unforeseen things. Coming to the hustler, one thing, let me see. The areas of hustler is to enable the hustlers to thrive. And the expectation is that how is life going to be comfortable to them? probably this can be addressed when you also first deal with what we call the prices of commodities, and especially those commodities that we eat, like flour and other things, which you cannot at least a single day wake up and get that solution. Because one, we have just declared that we are not going to do subsidy in such commodities, and instead what we are going to do is to fund areas of production, which is very okay, and I have no problem. Because when the farmer is being enabled with at least a cheaper means of fertilizer, or that in short food farming inputs, you expect that in fact even the produce that actually you expect that is final product will also be cheaper in the market, and that is how hustler's life can be enabled, because there is no way that you can say the hustler will get enough, and this country cannot be able to stand to say that it is needed to give out help to anybody who does not have enough.
All right.
So what do you do to make sure that all of us are within and fitting in the same matrix? It is just to make sure that areas of concern are being taken care of, and those areas are the areas that actually tomorrow will give a room to still keep these things moving. Unga is, we took this government when the Unga was 220, and even without subsidy now it's about 180. That tells you if we can be able to get enough land and get a good production of maize at a lower price, there is a possibility of the Unga to come to 120 or something.
All right.
So in the short term, we may not have realized or gotten exactly what we can expect. But at least in the long term, I am sure we will get it.
You will get it.
Yes.
Mheshimiwa, yesterday in your submissions, of course, supporting the amendments, some of the amendments, and what Dindi your chair was tabling, you talked about realigning government programs. Of course, as you were looking at recurrent expenditure, as well as what lies in future before you enter into the other budget. Probably you would take this moment and tell Kenyans, when you are realigning programs, what were the priorities probably? First of all, you being a member of parliament from the Kenya Kwanza side, what were the priorities you were looking at?
We have key priority areas. You realize in the past, the way budgets have been done, let me start by just narrating on what has happened in the past when it comes to formulation of budgets. We've used what we call incremental budgeting, where a ministerial department or agency just adds. If in the last financial year they were allocated 100 million, they will add to a certain percentage, and then that's the budget that is forwarded. So we are saying we need to make a paradigm shift from that particular scenario behavior and move to zero-based budgeting. So even as we get into a new budget making process, the formulation of a new budget, we're saying we're going to focus on zero-based budgeting, where we look at the priorities, key priority areas for the Kenya Kwanza government: agriculture, manufacturing, we're talking of health, we're talking of manufacturing and industry, we're talking of digitization, the e-government. So those are the areas we're looking at, because we must address the social and developmental issues affecting this country. We must address the issues of unemployment. We must create opportunities for Kenyans. We must address the issues of poverty. We must address the issues of drought mitigation. That is agriculture. We must address so that we are able to grow the economy and to drive the Kenya Kwanza agenda. So what we are saying is we were allocating resources to these key priority areas. So, and even going forward, we will be looking at individual ministerial department estimates and scrutinizing and interrogating item by item and asking ourselves, where is the value for money? We're saying we want to reduce the cost of unga. We will look at the Ministry of Agriculture. Where has the money been put? Where have they directed the money in terms of production? We'll be looking at where is the money for fertilizer, for example. We'll be looking at irrigation. how many acres is the ministry targeting to irrigate? The issue of dams to harvest water so that we are not dependent on rain-fed agriculture. We are looking at manufacturing, the value chain, the value added. Where are we exactly putting money? Mining. Issue of EPZs, you've seen we put money in EPZs so that we can be able to put money in textile, in apparels, and leather value addition chains, so that we're able to create employment and also spur the economy. So that is what we are doing, realigning, making sure resources are being allocated, appropriated for functions that are key and critical towards growing the economy.
All right, Mheshimiwa Gakuya, looking at the supplementary budget and probably how much government departments are using, for example, you see the expenditure for the presidency, what the president, his deputy, and the Prime Cabinet Secretary are going to use, even the budget the Parliament is going to use. The people who ask, why didn't Parliament just bite the bullet and cut if we really were serious on austerity measures, saving money?
One thing, there is one thing that is not possible, even when you come to that element of reduction of cost or minimizing costage. One, today, this is KBC. It is, let me call it an organization, or in short, an institution, where it will not be possible to deduct salaries of the staffs. It will be chaotic. So in that area, if you go to the wages, then you have touched, and let me tell you, demoralized, and there's no way that actually you can expect more growth in work, because you have demoralized them. The same case applies to the Parliament. You must ask yourself, which areas are we going to cut? Do you want to tell members of Parliament you have closed them from benchmarking, so that at least we save? Is that the answer? Yes. Do you want to tell them, yes, from now, let us not be moving even now to do oversight, even within our domestic, so that we save. So there is that areas that actually of concern. If you want to enable this member to work, you must give him the tools, and the tools is facilitation. Failure to that, then you are saying let the member be idle and pay him a salary. Yes.
All right. Quite an interesting explanation there. Let's talk about, before we turn now to issues of trade. There was a 6.1 billion shillings expenditure. I was hearing you mention frequently, of course, back to Telcom. And you talked about expenditure by the previous regime that was expended without parliamentary approval. And I had members urge you to go an extra step, go a step further, and probably recommend sanctions for the officers involved. Tell us a bit about what is this expending without parliamentary approval, and how did it happen?
Article 223 of the Constitution allows National Treasury to make certain payments that had not been approved or appropriated for by Parliament. And then seek approval of Parliament 2 months after expenditure. Or if Parliament is in recess, for example, Parliament is not working, then they should bring that expenditure to Parliament 2 weeks, in a period of 2 weeks after Parliament resumes for purposes of approval. So if they are allowed to do that, but they are allowed to incur expenditures in circumstances where the appropriated amount was insufficient. This is an expenditure, money had been allocated, but then it turns out the allocation was insufficient. 2, these are new expenditure altogether that has arisen, but it must be unforeseen and of an urgent nature. You understand? So that is the Constitution. Now, the situation we are confronted with is a situation where National Treasury made payments to Helios Limited, I think for I don't know, sale of Telecom Kenya, and we asked for documentation to justify their urgency, and the payments were paid, I think, 4 days to election, thereabout, 4 to 5 days to election. So we were questioning and we were asking the ministry and the control of budget, what was the urgency in making this payment of 6 billion? Just a few days to the general election, when everybody is busy and we are all in the campaigns. what was the urgency? It does not qualify. It doesn't fit under the urgency. So it doesn't fit under Article 223. So, and then we also did not get any satisfactory explanation, nor were any documentation submitted to the committee to justify the expenditure. So, because of that, the committee decided to reject the expenditure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just to underline that, there is also a caveat that the Treasury can only expend 10% of that budget. Yes, otherwise going beyond that, it's contrary to the law.
It's contrary to the law. Let's talk about trade now, Mheshimiwa. I mean, you've seen the conversation going around. What was started by the Cabinet Secretary for investments, trade and investments, Moses Kioria, about China City. Yesterday there were demonstrations in town by traders. Now you have the Deputy President promising to resolve that issue in a few days. But what do you make, as a chairperson of the Trade Committee in the National Assembly, what do you make around this entire debate?
One thing, let me say, we have a very close relationship between China and Kenya. And it's a relationship that we cannot purport or allow to be killed because of anything. Otherwise, we better use our diplomatic ways of resolving issues. But moving to the street in demonstration is not secure. Also, we must also balance the words to use. When we arrive to such a crucial situation where you are touching a relationship of two countries. One, who needs who? Today, you have an SGL that you have not even paid a quota. Okay? If we can sit here and count what actually you owe Exim Bank, it is tens of trillions of money. So who needs who? It's you who needs the China. You can close your doors, you can put sanctions on anything else, but at the end of the day, you still owe them at the end of the day. So in this particular case, what does we need to do? One, I cannot stand here to say that the traders does not require to be protected because there are means and has to be ways of how every single country must protect its indigenous traders. And I cannot say that, in fact, exploiting them is the way to go. They need to enjoy their country. Because actually there's nowhere else that they can enjoy better than their home. Well, Kenya is their home. But yes, today, we are fighting because you traders, you move out of this country, head into China, buying to China, bringing here. We have no single law which bars or prohibits the same China people to come and trade here. Today, we have Indians who have what we call retail markets all over in the CBD. We are not making queries. And they have been here for years and years. Today, only one center there, which is China Square, then the Karama is out. Then the big question is, if then you have to put caveats, you cannot just do for a single country. And you cannot just point a finger to one person. If there is an issue to do with an element of maybe taking over those areas of concern that local traders should be left to depend on, then put caveats to all. Yes, but you cannot single-handedly say China. Then that's a discrimination.
Quite interesting. Mheshimiwa, as you weigh in this matter, as Mheshimiwa says, clearly, Kenya needs China because of the kind of relationship we have with China and the amount of loans that we owe them. But there are people who ask, does bilateral relations mean we surrender our sovereignty to another nation, so much so that even work permits that normal Kenyans can do in the streets, we are granting work permits to foreigners to do the same thing?
Let us prepare policies and regulations to guard that.
All right.
Thank you. I think, first of all, I must say, in any relationship, bilateral or otherwise, there are moments of discontent or conflict may arise along the way. But whenever that arises, I think a solution should be sought diplomatically. There is need for our Ministry of Trade and Foreign Affairs to engage diplomatically with the China government, as opposed to the pronouncements that we see publicly coming from our CS. Having said that, I think it is a matter of policy, as he puts it. It's a matter of policy, government coming up with policy, we as legislators coming up with legislation that kind of puts some caveats or ring fences certain opportunities or businesses for the locals. You know, when that is done, then room for conflict is minimized, it does not arise. Then we do not end up blaming any country for coming up and taking up what we feel or believe should be rightfully for the locals only. And also, it is a wake-up call. It means we need to go an extra mile, and that is why we are saying we are realigning our budgets. We must put money where it should go so that we are able to spur our manufacturing sector. Let us begin to produce all these items and goods so that our people can buy and consume Kenya. Then that way we do not have to import, we do not have to blame the Chinese, we do not have. But when we do not have, we are not producing. We are not manufacturing. We are depending largely on imports. Then the imports will continue to come and we'll continue to see the change. So it's a wake-up call for all of us, the legislators, the nation. We need to do something about it.
All right.
Yeah.
Maybe to add right on that. Also, we have grown enough. In fact, after independence, we are now all moving to 60 years. It does not mean that, in fact, we cannot manage these what we call small industries. How can we be dependent forever with imports, with smaller things that we can locally manufacture, even in those small industries that we can manage ourselves? So I am asking, let us have a robust kind of, our skills are just idle and we are not utilizing them because there is nobody coming with the new ways of how to utilize these skills. Yes, the government should put money in the area of industry. Don't allow, if it's the China, and you understand that this commodity, we must go to China. Why don't you bring that industry here? So that industry is locally owned, it employs locals, and let me tell you, that China will be only there to manufacture. Then we buy from there. Yes.
Tell me, Mheshimiwa, because this is a responsibility. When it comes to the legislative end of government, this matter lies in your shoulders. And now you have this statement. In fact, the Chinese embassy has released a statement this evening asking the Kenyan government to protect legitimate business owners in the Republic of Kenya. What are you going to do as the chairperson of the Trade Committee?
One thing is that I have just told you that, in fact, I was in that particular meeting which was held today at Annex. And the best way to go is to handle this matter diplomatically. And we must protect China's investors. We have no choice. Yes, we must protect them. We need investors. Otherwise, who are these people we are calling investors if not China is not part of them? Yes, tell me, who are they? You need the West, you need the Asians, including the Indians. Then you cannot just wake up and say, you don't need China, and there is no that drastic measure they have gone against your policies. So streamline your policies, let them be within your regulations.
All right.
And I think,
and just to weigh on to that, you know, we also do not want to set precedents as a country that is hostile to investors. Yet we are saying, let us improve on our environment so that we attract investors to come to Kenya. So what message are we sending out? That we're mistreating investors in this country. So we'll actually be chasing away the investors.
All right.
I think it's important that that's why it's important that it is done diplomatically. Yes.
Let me give you, Mheshimiwa, a minute as we wind up as the chairperson of a trade committee to look into that camera and promise Kenyans that the interests of Kenyans will be protected. Because, I mean, the bottom line of this whole conversation is about protecting Kenyans and, again, protecting the interests also of our business or investing partners.
one, I would like to promise Kenyans that, in fact, as policy makers, we must make sure that, in fact, we streamline what is not streamlined. What we must do is to just adopt what Ethiopia are doing. Ethiopia, there are 3 tiers of investment or investors, where it starts from the national government, county, and then there's a room for the other private individual partnership. But there is an invest businesses that are purely left to the locals. And that is what we must do. We must categorize that so that, in fact, anybody else who actually moves in to invest with us does not contravene. Right. And that's the way we need to go. And that is what we do. So that at least we protect our local investors, because we need to protect them most. Because at the end of the day, they are the citizens. Okay. And there's no way that we can subject them to an element of being moved out of the business. At the same time, let us also respect the investors, because we need them like yesterday. There are areas of investment that we cannot build. That's why we are always moving to China. If we are good enough and we are capable enough to feed ourselves, then we could do it here.
Okay. Mheshimiwa Miriam Emase, very quickly, your closing remarks.
Thank you. I think before I put my closing remarks, allow me to wish all women a happy Women's Day tomorrow. Happy Women's. It's an international day celebrated tomorrow to celebrate the achievements of women and also advocate for gender parity. We're looking forward to a world where there is no bias, no discrimination, where we advocate for actually gender parity. So happy Women's Day.
Thank you very much.
And as I close, I just want to assure Kenyans that we are working to ensure that we run a lean government, a government where we're living within our means. Living within our means meaning prudently utilizing our resources and appropriating them towards our key priority areas so that we're able to minimize the debt, to minimize the deficit so that there's less borrowing. So we will work tirelessly to ensure that we address all the challenges, mitigate against drought, that we increase our production by allocating more resources there, that our children are going to school, junior secondary, now we put in money so parents will not have to pay school fees. And I think the future is bright. Kenya Kwanza government is working.
Thank you very much, Mheshimiwa James Gakuya, the chairperson of a trade committee and member of parliament for Embakasi North, and of course Miriam Emase, member of parliament for Teso South. And by the way, congratulations on your comeback in parliament. That's how we put a cap on Prime Edition. Thanks very much for watching. Have yourself a good night and God bless.